Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar series, Seniors Views. Over the next 7 weeks, we will be presenting a series of interviews with at least 6 experts in their fields about how different aspects of society have changed over the years, and under the theme Then and Now. We'll be here at 7 o'clock every Monday, with the exception of Thanksgiving Monday and tonight, which we're having on Tuesday because of last night's federal election. And we're coming on at 8 o'clock tonight, but in the ensuing weeks, it'll be at 7 o'clock. And speaking of exceptions, if I were to pick a theme song for tonight's guest, it would be Forever Young by Bob Dylan. Marty Adler has been a radio DJ, TV and radio personality, entrepreneur, TV commercial production house owner several times in the past 6 decades. He's also well known as a horseman, both on the track and as a track announcer, and just an expert at that sport. And after 6 decades, he's going strong, very strong. That's a Trumpism, I think. He's pursuing a new project in broadcasting, which we'll talk about later. And also he's faced some health challenges lately, but like everything else Marty does, he's fought through it. So it's my honor to welcome the one and only Marty Adler. Marty, thanks for being here tonight.
How you doing, Rob? It's good. It is good to be here. And word with a capital C.
Okay.
But Rob, before you start,
yes,
you're going to be asking me questions, and people are going to want to know when they hear the answers, is this really true? So I have a way of letting people know that everything that I say tonight is the truth. It's all how you set up your interviewee. You have to set him up in a certain way, and I'm the interviewee, that he's always going to be able to tell the truth. So I found a way to do that. So it starts with this, okay? It starts with this and this. So I'm going to pour a little of this in here, all right? And then I'm going to add a little bit of this, okay?
Okay.
So I have 2 shots. Put that there, put that in there. And then I'm going to add a little more ice. Okay, it's right here. I'm putting the ice in right now. And after I have a couple of these, okay, what you hear today, you're not going to believe some of the things you hear today. But after I have a couple of these, you're going to find that I'm holding back nothing.
Okay.
So go right ahead, Rob. I'm prepared.
Let's get started. Margarita time in Amherstburg. Okay. Just for our audience out there, we promoted this as broadcasting then and now. And we're doing this through Marty's career because he goes back to the 60s up to the present. He's still active in broadcasting. We'll get into more of that later. But when did you decide to become a broadcaster, Marty?
I'm going to tell you, I was in grade 8 going to Harry E. Guppy Public School. And in grade 8, we used to have something called the Red Cross Assemblies. I would be up on the stage entertaining during these assemblies. And 2 of my favorite things to do when I was in grade 8 was, you may remember, and this would be back around 1957, 58. There was Paul Winchell and Jerry Mahoney, if you remember them. Paul Winchell was a ventriloquist. Jerry Mahoney was his dummy. And so I was up on the stage, and I was Paul Winchell, and he was a guy I went to school with that you will know. He's no longer with us. His name is Tom Wilson. Remember Tommy Wilson?
Yes.
Tommy Wilson ended up being a teacher. He ended up being on council. He passed away just recently. They're going to have a big thing for him on September the 25th. Because of COVID, they couldn't have a memorial for him. But Tommy Wilson was my dummy. And Tommy used to sit on my knee. I was Paul Winchell. Tommy Wilson was my dummy. So that was one assembly in grade 8. The other assembly, my hero. This is the guy my whole life. I gauged every. Have you ever heard of Soupy Sales?
Yes.
Soupy would be on in the afternoon at 12 noon with his lunch with Soupy. There'd be White Fang, ooh, 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 and then there'd be Blacktooth, and these were handled by Tommy Wilson. He would do White Fang, and Blacktooth, Detroit. And I did all those Soupy things. And then after grade 8, I went to Kennedy Collegiate in my first year of high school. In grade 9, they used to have assemblies, grade 9 assembly, grade 10, 11, 12, and 13. And in the grade 9 assembly, they made me the MC of the assembly. And what did I do? I used to tell Soupy jokes. And in telling Soupy jokes on the stage, I ended up telling a couple jokes that, and I'll tell you what it was. I used to say, well, I'm going to sing a song before we introduce our next piece of talent here of the grade 9 assembly. And I was going to sing a song. Maybe you've heard of it. It was called I Left My Heart in San Francisco and Now I Have Nothing to Pump the Blood. Did you ever hear that song? Or maybe you heard the song She Was Meant for Me and I Was Meant for Something Better. Or maybe you heard the song She Used to Go with the Landlord and now she goes with the lease. Well, those didn't get me kicked off the stage. But what got me kicked off the stage was me singing the song that was called Roll Out the Barrels. I lost my pants at a crap game. And as soon as I said that, Mr. Ryan, the vice principal, stands up and pulls me off the stage and says, get on with this, get on with this. And that afternoon, the library teacher, oh my God, she called me over. I was over at Guppy doing a class, a grade 9 class at Guppy then, calls me out and she looks me up and down. She says, you know, it does not belong on the stage of Kennedy Collegiate. It belongs in the Elmwood Casino. And because of you, we are about to start a censorship board at Kennedy. And it was because of me. They set a censorship board. So that's when I first knew that I was going to be in this kind of business, the entertainment business, one way or another. To answer your question, that's how it started.
Okay, so where'd you start in radio?
Well, first I've got to tell you, when I was in high school, I used to MC all the dances. I playing the music, and while all the kids are out there dancing, I did it at Kennedy. There was no stage at Kennedy. You had to get behind where they stored all the bleachers, and you couldn't see the disc jockey. I then went to Patterson for 2 years, and at Patterson in the gym they had a running track around the top of the gym, and I was up on the running track, and I had lights, and I had my turntables looking down all the dancers. And then when Massey opened a stage in the gymnasium for the sock hops, and we opened up the curtains, and I was up on the stage, and on the stage is where I had my turntable, and I played music. So now the disc jockey was out in front. This is 1960 and 61. And I should tell you that my best friend back then was Wayne McLean. Wayne is no longer with us either. People may remember him. He had a tremendous career in radio. Wayne always beat me at the public speaking contest. I could never beat him. Something when we were at Patterson on Friday nights, there was an A&W on Dougal Avenue, not where it's now, across the street from where the Walmart is. And at this A&W, they had car hops. You would drive your car in, park underneath the roof, and a car hop would come out and serve you or take your order. And Wayne and I came up with a 5-watt and a great big 12-foot pole made out of copper for our antenna. And we set our transmitter at 810 because anybody that came onto the property would probably be listening to CKLW at 800. But when you came onto the property for that small little area, our transmitter would knock CKLW off the air. And so when you pulled in, you're listening to CKLW, but as soon as you pulled in, you're on the roof of the A&W. And what we used to do then we would look and see who was coming in the cars, and we'd be up there, we'd be playing music, and we'd say, oh, look who just showed up. There's little Rob. And oh, do you see who Rob's with tonight? Rob is with Anna. Look at, that's not his girlfriend. It's what's Veronica going to say when we tell everybody on the radio that Rob is with Anna and not Veronica? Oh my God, what's going to happen? And so that would be on the radio being played on all the cars that were on the A&W property. And then out would come the waitress, and she had taken the order already. And we'd say, oh, look what Rob is ordering. He's ordering a Papa Burger and a root beer. Wow, holy smokes. And look what Anna's ordering. She's ordering a Mama Burger and a brown cow. So that's where Wayne and I started our radio career, on the roof of A&W. And then Wayne Leamington, he had a good friend there by the name of Lou Thomasy at CJSP is what it was called back in those days. And he got me a job back in 1960. I would have been about 17 years old. And he got me a job Sunday mornings. I would drive from Windsor to CJSP in Leamington at 5:30 in the morning. And for 6 hours, I would be introducing all the programming for the Sunday only programming, like the Italian hour, now the Portuguese hour, and then we'd go to a church service, and then another. That's where I started, CJSP on Sundays, and I made $5 a day, probably overpaid. But in any event, that was my first gig in radio, but it was a very short-lived gig. And when I actually got into radio,
Go ahead.
Okay. When I actually got into radio, it was at a place called in Wingham, Ontario. Let's see if I have my right card here, and I can tell you where Wingham is located. All right, here's Windsor right here. All right, I don't know if you can see that. All right, Windsor is right there, and London is right there. Toronto is over here. Wingham is 70 miles north of London. And it was a station that had burnt down 2 years previously, and they rebuilt it as a radio and television station. And they hired me for $50 a week, overpaid again. They started, they were only playing country music. So when I first started in Wingham, I decided I would call myself Cousin Marty. Howdy, friends and neighbors. This is Cousin Marty coming to you from Hayloft Hoedown. And so I would be playing country music during the week. And on Saturdays, we'd have music from the Grand Ole Opry. Back in those days, we would get an album once a week. And in the album would be a disc. It would be cuts. And every cut was another act at the Grand Ole Opry. And so I would be playing the cuts. And after every cut, we would go up to Hanover Racetrack and hear the race that was being set off that in between the cuts. So there'd be a Grand Ole Opry, then a race, a Grand Ole Opry, another race. And that's how I first got involved with harness racing, by playing that. But after about 6 months, I said to the management in Wingham, I said, you know, I come from an area where there is rock and roll and hot. I said, how about trying it in Wingham? And I said, I got an idea for a show. Kids get out of high school at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Why don't we have a show called 4 to 6 are for teens? And that's what we did. 4 to 6 were teens, and I got all my 45 discs. I got all the hot hits. I was able to go to Detroit and buy the discs, because Wingham never got 45s. All they got was country music. They never got 45s and hot music from the record companies. And so we started a rock and roll teens Monday to Friday. And then they asked me to do a television show. We called the show Marty's Place.
Now in Wingham, wait a second. Is that how you got into TV, doing that?
Into TV, yeah. That's when TV started, right, with Marty's Place, yeah. And what we did was at Marty's Place, we would have a different high school on every week. We'd send a bus out to the school, whether it be Goderich or whether it be Goderich, Clinton, Kincardine, Port Elgin, Hanover, Walkerton, and they all had high schools. And every week we'd bring on a different high school, and we would tape the show, and then the kids could go home, and the next day they can actually see themselves on TV in this show called Marty's Place. And long before you ever saw MTV, where they used to, I used to do video songs on that show back in 1964. I was doing video songs, and I can still remember to this day a couple of songs that I did. You remember Alexa, play Tommy James and the Shondells, I Think We're Alone Now, by Tommy James and the Shondells. Alexa, are you there? She's not there. I have Alexa set up to play the song.
I'm here.
Play.
I listen once I hear the wake word.
All right. Alexa, play Tommy James and the Shondells, I Think We're Alone Now. And you have to imagine,
I think we're alone.
I was 21 years old, and we get an 18-year-old girl sitting beside me. And this song is being through the girl. All the kids in the high school are hiding behind the couch. And Tommy James starts singing. And when he says, I think we're alone now, and I'm making my move on the girl, all of a sudden, all the kids pop their heads up from behind the couch. And I'm trying to get this girl to give me a kiss. So, all right, Tommy, forget it. Alexa, stop. But he sings, I think we're alone now, and then all heads swap. But anyway, we did all kinds of crazy things on that show. Like we were sponsored by Pepsi, and I had the pop sipping championship of the world, where you have a bottle of Pepsi, 2 straws, you have a couple here, a couple here, and a couple here. And when you say go, that you have to see who can sip a bottle of Pepsi the fastest. And then every high school competed against each other every time this weeks on the next weeks. And the other championship, which is my favorite, I had the bathroom tissue unraveling championship of the world, because you never know when you're going to have to unravel a roll of bathroom tissue in a hurry. And what that was, you'd have a guy and a girl. One of them would hold the bathroom tissue between their 2 fingers, and there'd be a pair here, a pair here, and a pair here. And when I said go, you have to unravel the bathroom tissue, right? And the record, in case you want to try it at home sometime, roll of single ply bathroom tissue, because they were one of our sponsors as well. So we did crazy things up there in Wingham, and I got to try all kinds of stuff, play all kinds of music as a disc jockey. And radio played a big part in my life then, because radio, when you were on radio and you said, look, I'm going to be over here. Next thing, everybody shows up. It was amazing. I'm going to be over at this site. And we had we had dances every Friday night named after the TV show. Friday nights in Wingham, Ontario, it was the place to go. Kids showed up from everywhere. We had groups of up to 200 and 300 people filling a little place called the Royal Tea at the north end of Wingham. I don't even know if it's still there. In fact, Wingham back then, the greatest little town of 3,000 people you would ever want. There were 3,000 people in 19 check. There's 2,999 people there today. When somebody dies, somebody's born. When somebody leaves, somebody comes in. Wingham, Ontario, it had everything. It had an LCBO. It had a brewer's retail. It had a Kentucky. It didn't have Kentucky Fried Chicken then. It had a Chinese restaurant. It had a theater. It had a high school. It had a hospital. It had a river running through. It had everything. And also, that's where I formulated everything that I wanted to do with the rest of my life in radio. And then I got a chance. You want the next station I went to? CKLC, the Busy Bee.
Before you leave there, that was black and white TV, first of all, right?
Right.
And tell me about Dr. Rigor Mortis.
Well, I told you I love playing TV. I'll get to rigor mortis in a second. One thing that we had to do everything there, they made us actually do live commercials on their TV shows, black and white. And there was an afternoon show, Anna, I can't remember her last name, but she did an interview show in the afternoon, and I had to do a live commercial for Bix Pickles. Bix Pickles made out of London. And, the pickle jar, you got to hold the pickle jar up, and the script is live. No chance of any, you make a mistake, it goes. And the script was Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. I'm getting a little dry here.
Go ahead, take a swallow. We're all friends here.
And I'm telling the truth too. The script was Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers and Bix put it in a jar just for you. So it's getting time to run the commercial, and I'm standing there. There's a camera on in front of me, a floor director beside him saying, stand by. And I'm holding the pickles upside down. And all of a sudden, it's, okay, get ready, 30 seconds, get ready, like this. And they started spritzing all over my face. I'm holding it like this, and I go, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, and Bix put it in a jar just for you. That was live. And that was the beauty of live, because when you made a mistake, there, you can't, not like on tape, cut, we'll do it again. Cut, we'll do it again. When it's live, it goes.
Right.
So the other thing that I came up with then, on Sunday nights, we used to show horror movies on CKNX in Wingham. And I said to them, the horror movie. And they said, yeah, all right, go ahead. So Sunday nights, I would watch the movie like on a Thursday, because it was all a film and they had to put in the commercial cuts. In those days, you had to cut the film to splice in a commercial. So I would watch it and I would know where the splice was and what was on the screen leading up to the commercial, what was coming on after the commercial. And I called myself Dr. Rigor Mortis. And Dr. Rigor Mortis, the problem with Dr. I said the name Rigor Mortis, something would stiffen up on me. I say the name Rigor Mortis, it would stick up on me. If I said Dr. Rigor, my neck would stick up on me. It's a good thing they didn't see below the belt. That was just a joke. That's not true. That's not true. So anyway, I was Dr. Rigor Mortis on CKNX and Wingham 2. And I reprised Dr. Rigor Mortis when I was doing an afternoon show here in Windsor with Marilyn McKay called Insight. And it was Halloween time as Dr. Rigor Mortis. Wait a second. Okay, there we go. So that was Dr. Rigor Mortis. And after 3 years in Wingham, paying $6 a week for a room to live in Wingham, making $50.50 a week, I got a chance to make it to the big time, and that was Hamilton. You ready for Hamilton?
Yep.
Okay. One thing I did develop in Wingham, by the way, and I developed it there. On Sunday afternoons, I'd be on from 12 until 6 o'clock, 6-hour shift. I loved it. I mean, I loved radio station when I was, 24 years old, 22 years old, whatever. And I developed a show where I played music in the afternoon. I played rock music. I played Barbra Streisand and stuff like that. But on the final hour of the show, I brought to radio what I used to do at my record hops. At my record hops, the last half hour of every record hop I had, whether it be at Massey, at Patterson, at Kennedy, whether it be at the country club, it used to be Kennard Valley. I did the Riverside Arena record hops, all my record hops. The last half hour, if you could imagine, if you were a guy, be able to take a girl home. And so you didn't want to be dancing fast. You wanted to be dancing slow. You wanted to be able to put your arm around that girl and, and hug her a little and say, can I take you home? Or do you want to go get a brown cow or something like that? That's what the guys wanted. What did the girls want? Some of them were never asked to dance all night. So that last half hour was always a lady's choice. And the last half hour of the dances correlated to the last half hour of what I wanted to do in radio. And that was play soft music for lovers and losers. And I developed music for lovers and losers in Wingham. And then when I moved to CKOC, the Busy Bee, the big station in Hamilton, it was the hot rock station, and they made me the hot rock jock. And that was after 3 years in Wingham. And I was on from 8 until midnight. And the last hour of the show from 11 until 12, even in my studio, I had my microphone. I could hear that I was late at night. Either they were university kids that were studying, they were kids lying in their bed from high school. They were listening on the radio, because back in those days, the disc jockeys were heroes to all these kids. And in my last hour, I started playing music for lovers and losers. And CKOC put ads in the personal column of the Hamilton Spectator saying, listen to Marty Adler night with music for lovers and losers. And I ended up getting more mail, real mail, not email, real. There was no email back then. Getting more mail than all the other disc jockeys at the station combined. I was getting piles like this after only being there 3 months. And after being there 3 months, one night though, I get off the air at midnight and the program director is there. And I said, this is after 3 months. What are you doing here? And he says, I've got your checks, baby. His exact words. I've got your, well, what does that mean? It means you're fired. Fired? You're fired. I left. Didn't ask why. He didn't
Never
tell me
found
why,
out?
but I got, what's that?
You never found out why?
I did find out. And I'll tell you that, but I didn't find out then. And that's part of the story. So I go down to St. Catharines, and St. Catharines hires me immediately. A station called CHSC, really soft, easy music. And they put me on the show there was called Music for the Night. This is music for the nighttime. That's what I was playing. And after only a month, they said, you know what, we're going to put you on in the morning. And you know, at any radio station, the number one guy at the radio station is the morning man. So they made me the morning man at CHSC. So they made me the morning man at CHSC. Then they had me doing voice tracks for the nighttime show. Then they had me doing commercial production. And then they had me going out on remotes. After a year, doing everything. And one thing I should tell you about being in Hamilton at CKOC, the previous station, I met a guy by the name of Jack Stevens, and he was the racetrack announcer for the Ontario Jockey Club. And he was the racetrack announcer at Greenwood in Toronto, Mohawk in just outside of Guelph, and Garden City, which happened to be in St. Catharines, which is where the radio station was that I was going. So that's where I met him. And on occasion, he'd say, if you're not working, can you fill in for me? And I would fill in for him. So now I'm in St. Catharines working during the morning from 5:30, doing production. I'm doing voice tracks, and I'm going out on remotes. And Jack Stevens is giving me a gig to drive to Greenwood Raceway, 70 miles away. And then I'd call the races in Toronto at the track. And when the races were over at midnight, I'd drive back to St. Catharines, get ready to do it all over again the next morning. And when the races came to St. Catharines, to Garden City Raceway, it was perfect because the horsemen would be racing at Greenwood in the wintertime. And then in the summer, they'd take a break in St. Catharines at Garden City, which is just about 20 minutes from Niagara Falls. What a great place to spend your summer. 6 weeks out of the summer at Garden City Racetrack. And the Garden City races were on the air at night on the number one station in town, CKTB. So here I am doing the morning show on CHSC, and at night I'm calling the races in St. Catharines and on CKTB, the other state. So after a year and a half, I came in one day to do a production, and the boss says to me, you know, you've got a remote. You better go home. You haven't shaven. And I said, you know what? You've got me doing everything at the station. And he says to me, well, you better watch out because you could be out on your ear. I said, this is a Mickey Mouse station. She said, you could be out on your ear. Well, my mother always said things happen for the best. And then he said, okay, you're fired. I got fired again. So what do? I go back to the station that had fired me a year and a half earlier, a CKOC. Yeah, I got to take another drink.
Yeah, take another drink. Okay.
They hired me back again at the station that had fired me a year and a half earlier. The guy who wouldn't tell me why he fired me. So it's the second day on the job. They give me the 12 till 4 shift. It's 2 o'clock. The news is on. It's a 5-minute newscast. When we come out of the news, I put a Regatta de Vida. It's a 13-minute long record. And I start the record, and I walk into the program director's office, the one that fired me. And I said to him, you know, there's a song on right now called Inagata de Vida. It's been on for 2 minutes. It's got about another 11 minutes to go. A year and a half ago, you fired me and you never told me why. So you know what I'm going to do? When that record is over, I'm not going to be in the studio. I'm quitting. All there. Goodbye. And I left, and he had to scramble to get somebody into the studio. And I finally got even with him. And from there, I came. That was in Hamilton. So I come back to Windsor, and I got a job at CKWW. WW, we called it, the Wonderful Windsor. And if I thought it was a Mickey Mouse station in St. Catharines, you ain't seen nothing yet until you worked at CKWW. I'll tell you how Mickey Mouse it was. But, you know, as I think about it, they were doing the right thing, as I think about it. They had little signs that said, think Windsor, think Windsor, think Windsor, think Windsor. On their newscasts, every story had to have Windsor in the story. Well, how do you do that in 1969, where the number one story in 1969, you know, remember what the number one story was in
Walking on the
1969?
moon.
Yeah, wait a second. What's
Walking on the moon.
that? Sputnik. That's what it was.
Oh,
Sputnik was
okay.
launched by the Russians. So tell
Okay.
me, how do you put Sputnik up there in the newscast and have Windsor as part of that story? Well, it was easy. What you do is you start your story out by saying, high above the corner of Oleg, Russians have launched a satellite named Sputnik. That's how you got Windsor in that story. How do you get Windsor in a story when there's an accident on 401 outside of London, between London and Toronto? How do you get Windsor in that story when nobody in the accident was from Windsor? Well, what you do is you say 120 miles east of Windsor on Highway 401, there was an accident. So that was really Mickey Mouse, and I really couldn't take that. So I found out that there was an opportunity to go to Channel 9 in Windsor, CK69. My ultimate job would have been working as a morning man, working in radio, and calling the races, because Windsor Raceway in 1969 was in its fourth year. It had opened up in 1965. It was in its fourth year. And what I managed to do in 1969 was go and see Al Siegel. Remember Al Siegel? He started with the
Yes,
Elmwood Casino.
I worked at
Windsor
the
Raceway.
Elmwood.
You did, huh? I delivered bread and rolls for my father in the kitchen at the Elmwood when I was 16 years old. It was the spot in Midwestern the United States, Midwestern North America. It wasn't a casino, but they had casino acts there. Do you remember some of the acts that were there, Rob? Do you know any?
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah, I
You want to tell them, or
served
do you
some
want
of
me
those
to?
people. Sammy
I'll
Davis
name
Jr.
one. You name one. Sammy Davis Jr., the Will Maston Trio. Go.
Let's see. Well, the summer I worked, Engelbert Humperdinck, Sammy Davis
right.
Jr., Ray
Milton
Charles.
Milton Berle,
Yes.
Sophie Tucker.
Well, that was before my time.
Yeah.
Jimmy
So
Durante
anyway,
was there. Jimmy Durante went there.
Jimmy Durante, yeah. Wait, Jimmy Durante. Wait a second.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's right. I think I had it on the back. Jimmy Durante. Okay. Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.
I knew you were going to do that.
What's that?
I knew you were going to do that.
You knew I'd do that.
So you get to CKLW, right? CKLW
I started
TV.
as a booth announcer. When I go there, first of all, they want, in order to get the job, they don't tell you this. If you want the job in the booth was the guy that sat in a little room, 4 feet, microphone, and all the scripts right there, windows all around you, and a television set. And at the top of the hour, you turn the mic on and say, "This is CKLW, Channel 9 in Windsor, Ontario." That was it. Or if there was a live show going on in the studio and you had to read a commercial, you'd have all the commercials in front of you and you'd be reading the commercials. I was the commercial reader. Well, let me tell you how I got the job. I get there. Frank Quinn, bless his soul, he's up there somewhere. I know he's watching. Manager. And all these people had auditioned to get this job as the booth announcer. $10,000 a year. Amazing. 1969. Couldn't believe it. 10,000. Wow. So they say to me, we're going to have you audition right now. and we want you to stand in front of a camera. And they made the big mistake. Oh, did they make a big mistake? You know what they said to me? We want you to talk about yourself. Wow. Yeah, for how long? They said, well, as long as you want to go. No, no. How long do you really want? 5 minutes. Is that it? I can't say hello in 5 minutes. That was the big mistake. And of course, what I did was I did it again. I told the truth. Hang on. Not a word of a lie. Here I am auditioning for a job at CKLW. It's going to pay $10,000 a year, competing against other people. And I start off by saying, well, I started in Wingham. I went to Hamilton. I got fired in Hamilton. Then I went to St. Catharines. I got fired in St. Catharines. Who's going to hire a guy who keeps on saying, but all the times he's been fired? But they hired me. And I got hired at CKLW in 1969. And excuse me. You know, I don't have my mask. Are you okay? I don't have my mask.
Yeah,
but
it's
anyway,
fine. I'm not feeling
you're all
it
right,
from you.
so,
Yeah.
Well, we're about 6 feet apart, so that's okay. So I get hired in 1969 at CKLW as the booth announcer. And you know what I used to, after a while, I mean, I went crazy. We had shifts where they were 10-hour shifts. We'd start at 5:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon, or 3:30 in the afternoon until 1:30. And why 1:30 is because we always showed a movie after the late night news at 11 o'clock. You remember Irv Morrison was on the news. Oh my God, I can't remember them all now. But you know, the who's who in broadcasting was in Windsor. We love them. All they did was stand in front of it at a podium and read copy, because those days there was not a lot of video and audio back in those days. A cameraman would go out and then he'd come back with film, and you'd have to get it was so tedious. You were lucky if you had one story on film when they read the news. But after the newscast, we would have a movie, and I would have it called Starlight Theater. Good evening and welcome to Starlight Theater. Tonight we have the movie Casablanca. It stars Humphrey Bogart, and now let's hear scene one. Well, what I used to do, because it was 11:30 at night, and I always had a lot of friends out there watching the late night movies, I'd put my friends in the movie, and I'd say, tonight Humphrey Bogart stars along with Rob Miller and Laurie Baldassi. I'd put them in the movies, and my friends would stay up just to hear their names mentioned in the movies. And ultimately at CKLW, I ended up getting to do a couple of shows on camera. Before those shows came up, I was doing the booth announcing for guys like Bill Kennedy. Remember Bill Kennedy? Oh man,
Yes.
what he did, the afternoon movies with CKLW in Windsor, was that we could not show American programming on our station like they showed at other stations in Canada, because we were so close to the border. The American stations like ABC, NBC, and CBS, they had the rights to a lot of American programming. So we always had to develop our own programming, and we had a lot of great programming. We were a hub in the Midwestern United States. They'd come from Detroit, and we would have our own programming. And I would be the booth announcer on a lot of that programming. We developed our own shows. You know, there was Swinging Time with Robin Seymour. We had country shows that were done live. We had some really great producers there. And plus it was Canadian money, Canadian talent, and the Americans loved coming over to Windsor. So from the booth announcer's job, I was allowed to do an afternoon interview show called Insight. And it was on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Back in those movie stars and book writers and people that wanted to promote their product, that were celebrities, entertainment celebrities, they couldn't, there was no internet. There was no film. There was no tele back and forth. There was no Zoom calls. They would have to travel from city to city to city. So when they went to Detroit, they naturally had an opportunity to come to another country by just going across the border, because we had an afternoon interview show. And so we got to interview all kinds of major celebrities. One day I had to interview Charlton Heston, Moses, And the next day I would interview Billy Graham, God. So I went from Moses to God, and I got to interview both of them. And it was great doing the show. I did it with a gal named Marilyn McKay, and that lasted 3 years. And I got to interview all kinds of people with all kinds of stories. I could keep you here forever telling you about the stories that took place on that show. I could tell you about the story where the movie star thought I was looking down her boobs. That was an you want to hear that story, Rob?
Sure, go ahead.
Rob, are you there? Her name was
I'm
Jenny
here.
Agutter. The year was 1976. She walks into the studio, gorgeous girl. The movie is called Logan's Run. And the studio is nice and cold. And we had these great big scoops for lights. And when the scoops came on, it got really warm. So Jenny walks into the set, and this is live. Dennis Olette is the floor director, and Jenny had a sweater on over her shoulders, and she's wearing a white open here, open here, open here, and that's not where it happened. So we are sitting on the set, and this is live now. Dennis puts the microphone on Jenny Agatter's sweater right here. That's where the mic was. Normally, like me, you'd put the microphone on the tie and wrap the wire behind the tie so you don't see the wire. All it is a little mic right here for a guy. For a gal, you'd put it on her lapel. In this case, Dennis put it on her sweater. And so now we're sitting there on the set. The lights are very warm. We haven't started yet. She and I are just chatting and figuring out what we're going to talk about. And then it's starting to get really warm. And Dennis goes, okay, stand by. We're going to start. They're coming to you in just a couple seconds. So as soon as he comes to me, or at least just before he comes to me, she takes her sweater because it's so warm and she puts it back over the back of the chair. And so now I start the interview, not knowing that she'd put the sweater back over the chair. Didn't think about it at the time. And I ask her a question and she starts talking and nobody can see her. Nobody can hear her. They can't hear her at all. And got a headset on and he's talking to the control room. The control room is saying, we can't hear her. We can't hear her. Where's her mic? Where's her mic? And Dennis is giving me the signal, the mic. Where's the mic? So Jenny is answering a question that I had asked her about the movie. And she's looking at me, and as she's looking at me answering, Dennis is saying, where's the mic? Where's the mic? Giving me the signal. And I start looking for the mic. Normally, like I said, it's here. It wasn't there, or it would be on right here. And I'm looking there, and she looks at me. I'm looking for the microphone. And she says, what are you looking at? I go, I got caught. I'm looking for a microphone. I'm not really looking there. I'm looking for the microphone. Anyway, there are all kinds of stories like that. I can keep you here for hours telling you about those stories.
Okay,
there's more to tell, right?
We have a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is,
there's somebody watching?
Yes, there is, believe it or not. What is your most memorable moment of your career? And do you have any regrets?
People will talk about your most memorable moments. They ask me that, what's your favorite horse race? I called for 43 years at Windsor Raceway. But I will tell you, the race I remember the most, it's a dubious race. It isn't a race where a horse won and I thought he was the greatest horse ever. It was a dubious story I told about the horse race. And my most memorable thing in my career with regards to broadcasting was the day I got fired. And I got fired right around 1988, 89. And I had been doing sports for 3 years. And I was on the top.
CBC. Let's clarify. We're now moved into the CBC.
Channel 9. I've been there for 17 years. And I was getting asked to do sports everywhere because of the way I did sports. That's a whole. I was asked by WDIV in Detroit to fill in for their sportscasters when they had the big New Year's games in California, and all the sports guys from Detroit went there. So they called me to work there, and I had to get permission. TSN hired me to do horse racing right across Canada. And so CBC said, you know, you should be on a contract, which allowed me to do all that stuff. And on this one day, we had a new programmer come to town who used to be a sportscaster in the Maritimes. His name, and I'll tell you, Bruce Taylor. Bruce Taylor is his name. I think he still lives in Windsor.
Yes, he does.
And he calls me into the office this day, and he says, Marty, I don't want you doing the TSN stuff, and I don't want you doing all that other stuff. And I said to him, well, you know, Bruce, I was working at the CBC when you wanted me to go off as a staffer, lose that staff position, and come on as a contract for the very reason that all these other stations were asking me to work for them, and you guys allowed it. And the good thing about it is when I would go to Calgary, or when I'd go to British Columbia on the weekend, and I'd pass people in the airport, and people would want to know, who's that guy on doing that stuff? He's the sportscaster from CBC Windsor. I said, it only enhances the station when people recognize me across the country, or when I go over to the States. Who is that guy? He's pretty crazy, but wow. And you allowed me to do that by giving me a contract. He says, well, I don't want you to do that anymore. I said, but it's in my contract. He says, well, I want you to make a choice. And he says, I either want to here, or I want you to go do all the other stuff. And I looked at him and I said, all right, I'm going to do your sportscast. And he says, good, but I'm also going to do all the other stuff according to the contract. And he says, you're fired. Just like that. It was a Friday afternoon, about 2:00 in the afternoon. And at that time, I just turned around and I left. I left the building, never to return again. And I got interviewed on the news that afternoon at 5:00. The cable company in town called Great Lakes. And a news crew came, and I was the lead story, not only on CBC News, but on all the radio stations on both sides of the border. Marty Adler fired at the CBC. And so they asked me on camera that afternoon, they said, well, you're not going to be on tonight at 11:20. What are you going to do? And I said to them, well, tonight at 11:25, when I'm normally doing sports, I'm going to go to the refrigerator and I'm going to open up the door. And when the little light comes on, I'm going to do 5 minutes. And that was my sportscast. And that's my most memorable moment, a dubious one, mind you. I mean, there are so many memories. I can keep you here all night telling you about stories and the way that I used to do sports, stories of around the racetrack. After the racetrack, you know, I won't say any more about CBC, or because after that I got hired by CKLW again, if you can believe it, as their sports director. They only hired me so they could sell a lot of commercials, and then after 6 months, Dave Schaefer calls me into his office. I thought this was funny. He calls me into his office, and I said, Dave, you're going to fire me, aren't you? You got 6 months out of me because of my name. I'm going to save you the trouble because I know I can see the pain on your face. You don't like firing anybody. 55 grand there as a sports director, and I was only working a few minutes a day, and I fired myself. And then Pass Sports over in Detroit hired me. They picked me up. And I worked with the Red Wings, the Pistons, and the Tigers. Nobody in Windsor ever saw me because it was a sports system in Michigan only. And it had all the Michigan sports on it, but they had me as the front guy. I didn't do the color. I hosted all the games. I was the guy you saw at the beginning of the game, in the middle of the game, at the end of the game, and I did shtick. That was my thing, doing shtick. And after 3 years of doing Pass, my boss, Bill Wishman, calls me into his car outside Tiger Stadium, and I said, Bill, I've seen that look before. I know what you're going to say. The contract, I'm fired. He says, yeah, Marty, Pass has been sold to Fox Sports Detroit, and they want all new people. I got fired again.
Okay, Marty, we're running out of time rapidly here. So there's 2 things I want to talk about before we finish our hour. One is you're pursuing a license for a small radio station in Amherstburg.
And this is where people who are still listening right now, or I was going to say at the beginning of this, that I've got something for you. All right. If you are a senior, if you think that, you're a little bored in your life, I have something that might interest you very much because I have applied. Uh, Another story, I got very sick. I lost my voice for 5 months, couldn't talk. I never smoked a day in my life, ended up with throat cancer, but my voice came back. And that's of having a license. The doctor says, I've never seen a recovery like yours. And so I've decided, since my voice is back, I'm going to kick cancer in the teeth. And I'm going to have a radio station and I'm going to talk more. And every time I open up my mouth, cancer will know that I beat you. I beat you, cancer. It's been 3 years to go on. I haven't, you can't say you beat cancer. You always get it.
How did you do
my
it?
last treatment was,
How did you do it, Marty?
they, I don't know if I want to get into this. It's a whole story, but I was calling the races at Leamington Raceway. I started getting a little hoarse. My son said, go see an ENT, ear, nose, and throat doctor. The doctor takes a biopsy of my thyroid gland. And I go home. He calls me the next day and says, you better come in and see me. And when they call you in, it's not good news. When they have good news for you, they usually tell you on the phone. And I say, good afternoon, doctor. And here are his words exactly. I have bad news for you. You have 4th stage esophageal cancer. We're going to take out your voice box or you'll be dead in 6 months. And I didn't know what to say. I said, and you're going to be bald in 6 months. That's what I said. I don't know what it meant, why I said it. I just wanted to throw something back at him. And I said, I want a second opinion. So I go to London. At London, the doctors there all examine me. This is the head of the cancer department at the hospital in London. They examine me and they leave the room, come back again, and they say, it doesn't look good. And they said, but we know how much you value your voice. It's the only thing I really have. I'm not that good looking. I'm not that strong. I'm not talented, but I have a voice. And they said, we know how much you're a track announcer. We know you are a sportscaster. So we're going to give you 3 options. Number 1, we'll take out your voice box and we'll put a little hole in your throat and Number 2, we can give you an extreme treatment, and it is extreme, of chemotherapy and radiation. 3 is if the extreme treatment doesn't work, we're going to take out your voice anyway, and you will have gone through that extreme treatment. So I chose number 2, and I came back to Windsor, and at the cancer clinic center here in Windsor. And his first words to me were, it won't be easy. And I said, look, and I'm not a brave guy, but I'll take whatever you throw at me. And what they do is they put a mask over your face to mask. They clamp you down to a table. And for 7 weeks, 5 days a week, I had to go into the cancer clinic and get radiation and chemotherapy. And the first thing that happened was everything started to taste like and phlegm, lard and phlegm, everything, whether it was meat, anything, whatever I put in my mouth. Then I started getting a thickening on my throat, and I couldn't swallow. And if you've ever had a sunburn on your back, take that sunburn and put it in your throat. And every time I would swallow, it would be like swallowing shards of glass. And then when I couldn't swallow, I had to go on liquids for 5 months. The product was like Ensure, but a high duty Ensure. 3 boxes a day of liquid, 3 a day for 5 months. I lost my voice and I couldn't talk. And I did this. I live alone. I've lived alone since 1993 when I got divorced, and I don't have anybody else. And the people that were in my life, there were only a few. I lived in Amherstburg. Everybody else lived everywhere else. My daughter lived in Maine. My sister lives in New York. My brother lives in Calgary. And I had a girlfriend at the time, not anymore. And I didn't want anybody to see what I was going through. And I did it all on my own. And it was awful. They were right. It was, but I got through it. And I started coming back. And I think the rest of the story, which is remarkable because of what happened, the rest of the story, I think I should tell it another time. But what I am going to say is I want to kick cancer in the teeth because my voice is back. The doctor said, "Never seen a recovery like yours." I'm his poster child. And I said to him, "Well, what do you think made my story the most remarkable story of all?" And he looked at me and he pointed his finger right on my nose. The same guy that told me I'd be dead in 6 months. He says, "Because you're a strong person." And so now I want a radio station. And I've got the call letters. There they are. Did I do it right?
No.
Anyway, CKBG 107.9. I don't have the license yet, but I'm going to get it. The CRTC, I've been dealing with them for almost 2 years now. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. And my idea of a radio station is the way a radio station should be, not like it is today. When you talk about radio today, you've got Bell Media, who has an inferiority complex. Why else would they city like in Windsor, CKLW and the other 3 stations? They're inferior, and they're buying stations all over the country. Bell is, Blackburn is, Rogers is, and they have one little central location, and they have the one studio, and everybody else plays off, and they fire everybody else at the locals. No, don't start me. When I talk about radio, the veins start popping out in my neck. And remember, I'm a sick person. But anyway, so my idea about a radio station, people who have been in radio, you know what? I used to say about horses, there is a story in every stall. And let me say about people, senior citizens in particular, you have a story, and people need to know your story. And if you think you're doing nothing with your life right now because you're retired, all you do is sit around the apartment all day, you watch CNN or you watch CBC, and you think like you're not doing anything with your life. Well, you come and see me, because my game plan for a radio station in Amherstburg, which is a great retirement town, and things are booming like you can't believe in the town, young and old, but because of all the things that are going on there. My radio station is going to be all things to all people in Amherstburg. It's going to be for the residents of the town, the businesses of the town, and for the tourists and visitors to the town. That's what CKBG is going to be. Now, maybe you don't want to work 40 hours a week, and I don't want you working 40-hour broadcasters out there who still have it in their blood, still want to have that moment where they can get it off their chest or have something to say. And so I think 3 hours a week for all the former broadcasters or senior citizens that have something to say, going to make you, and the key word is relevant. Because as we get older, we all believe we're not relevant anymore. There's no reason to be around. Our kids are grown. They don't want to be around us, right? Because they have their own things to do. They don't want to be looking after their parents anymore. They don't want to have to worry about why their parents are sitting around doing nothing or taking walks through the same park that they take a walk through every day, or playing with its acorns. I'm going to make you relevant again if you're the right person for me, and that's coming. For me, the additional thing is I'm kicking cancer in the teeth every time I open up my voice, and cancer has to hear me. And that'll have to come at another time.
Marty, thanks for being with us tonight. It's been both entertaining and inspiring. And I thank you for taking the time out to talk to us, and good luck with everything. You're one of my heroes, the king of
Well,
all
thank you
media.
for even thank you for even remembering who I am. A lot of people don't even remember anymore.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. Please come back to us next week. Marty Gervais will be our guest, the publisher from Black Moss Press and a longtime journalist and author and poet, the former poet laureate of Windsor. So for now, good night.